My lovable students, today I will explain you about the 19th and 20th century American and English literature. First of all, we have to know about Robert Frost. Understood? After that, I will also explain you about the other poets. Let's know about 19th and 20th century American and English literature. First of all, we should brush up our knowledge on Robert Frost. He is famously observed of free verse. Understood? So Robert Frost is famously observed of free verse. Robert Lee Frost. He was an American poet and also a playwright. Robert Lee Frost was an American poet and also a playwright. His work was initially published in England. So firstly, his works was published in England. After that, it was also published in United States. Robert Lee Frost. His full name was Robert Lee Frost. So firstly, initially his works published in England. After that, in United States of America. Robert Frost was born on 26 March in 1874 in San Francisco. San Francisco, which is in California. Understood? Robert Lee Frost, he was born in California in San Francisco, which is in United States. Understood? After that, he died on 29 January. He passed away on 29 January in 1963 in Boston, in Massachusetts, which is in United States. My lovable students, let's know about the parents. Who were the parents of Robert Frost? His parents. Robert Frost's father was William Prescott Frost. Understood? He was a teacher and also a journalist. Who? Robert Frost's father was William Prescott Frost. And his mother was Isabella Moody. My lovable students, you should mug up it. What I am explicating now, these are indispensable for you. You should not leave out. Robert Frost's father was William Prescott Frost and his mother was Isabella Moody. Robert Frost's personal life was plagued by grief and loss. If we consider Robert Frost's personal life was plagued by grief and loss. In 1805, at that time, all that time, his age was 11. Whose age was 11? Robert Frost's age was 11. And his father died of tuberculosis. Unfortunately, Robert Frost's father, William Prescott, he passed away of tuberculosis, leaving the family with just $8. All that time, his father had left only $8. Frost's mother had also passed away of cancer. Understood? In 1900. Frost's father had also passed away of cancer in 1900. Then Robert Frost had to commit his younger sister Jenny, understood, to a mental hospital, and where Jenny also passed away. Understood? After 9 years later, Jenny also passed away. So my lovable students, what is Robert Frost's famous poem? You should get by heart it. You have to mug up it. The Gift outright. It was published in 1961. Understood? It was his patriotic poem. the gift outright. Who is the first wife? Eleanor Frost. She was born in 1895 and passed away in 1938. Did Robert Frost lose his child? My lovable students, Robert Frost had 6 children. But unfortunately, 4 of Robert Frost's children out of 6, they had died before him of cholera, suicide, puerperal, fever and post-birth complication. It will be birth complication. But unfortunately, though Robert Frost had 6 children, out of 6 children, 4 children had passed away in front of Robert Frost because of cholera, suicide and puerperal fever. Frost died at the age of 88. Robert Frost passed away at the age of 88. How is Robert Frost different than other poets? The main difference between Robert Frost and other natural poets is this is the former treats natural as a real part of life. So Robert Frost, he was considering that nature as a real part of life. Whereas other poets such as William Wordsworth treat nature mystically and spiritually. Though William Wordsworth was the poet of nature, he was treating nature mystically and spiritually. But Robert Frost, he treats nature as a real part of life. My lovable students, let's know the 10 best creations of Robert Frost. The best poems of Robert Frost. 10 best poems of Robert Frost. 1. Mending Wall. 2. Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. 3. Birches. 4. Tree at My Window. 5. Acquainted with the Night. Then 6. Fire and Ice. 7. Desert Places. 8. Christmas Tree. 9. Mowing. 10. The Road Not Taken. Many of his poems are about natural world. My lovable students, let's shortly, briefly explicate on these poems. Mending Wall. One of the Frost's most famous poems, Mending Wall, is about human race primitive urge to mark its territory and our fondness for setting clear boundaries for our houses and gardens. One of the Frost's most famous poems, Mending Wall. It is about human race's primitive urge to mark its territory and our fondness for setting clear boundaries for our houses and gardens. While Frost believes that such markers are a throwback to an earlier stage in mankind's development, his neighbor believes that good fences make good neighbors. It has explicated, it has mentioned in this poem, Mending Wall. Number 2. Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. One of the Frost's best loved poems, if not the best loved, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening inspired by a real event in Frost's life. My lovable students, you have to know that the last line of this poem, the woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. I am explicating in Odia also. Just listen to me. I am explicating it in Odia also. ସୁନ୍ଦର ଯେତିକି ଅନ୍ଧାର ସେତିକି ଏହି ଯେ ଗହନ ବନ, ତେଣୁ ତୁ ଆପଣା ସଂକଳ୍ପ ଅଟଳ ଅଚଳ ରହୁରେ ମନ, ଆଗକୁ ପଡ଼ିଛି ପଥ ବହୁ ଦୂର ଆହୁରି କେତେ ଯେ ବାକି, ଚାଲିବି ଚାଲିବି ନ ପଡ଼ିବି ଥକି ମୁଦିବା ଆଗରୁ ଆଖି. And the last stanza of this poem I explicated in Odia, and in English it will be, the woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. So it was the most favorable, most favorite stanza of the late Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru. And stopping by woods on the snow evening inspired a real event in Frost's life, stopping by woods on his way home. Everything is silent around them apart from the soft wind and the slight sound of snowfall. Understood? Next one, number 3. Birches. One could do worse than be a swinger of birches. So concluded this wonderful blank verse meditation on the fun of playing around with these fine trees. So my lovable students, birches are the fine trees. One could do worse than be a swinger of birches. So concluded this wonderful blank verse meditation on the fun of playing around with these fine trees. While the poet was playing around these fine trees, swinging struck them, even dying of falling from other, that is the way to go. All that time, unfortunately, the birches first seeds in this poem turn out to have been bent. Unfortunately, bent. Not by a boy swinging from them, but from an ice storm. Unfortunately, while an ice storm occurred there, took place there, the birch bent down. But Frost prefers the more romanticized notion of his imagination dreams of. And in this poem, Birches draws on Robert Frost's childhood memories, and the trees Birches draws on Robert Frost's childhood memories of swinging on birch tree as a boy. And the birch tree as a boy, it depicted the childhood memories of Robert Frost. Number 4. Tree at my window. Another poem. This many of Robert Frost's greatest poems feature trees and foods. My lovable students, you should consider fruits. We cannot write food into foods. It always takes singular verbs. Clothing, food, poetry, stationery, furniture, cutlery, cookery, jewelry, scenery, information. They always take singular verbs. But this is a poem. A poet can do everything through imagination. If you consider that it has written foods, so we cannot write food. If you consider in grammatically, this is wrong. Understood? So though Robert Frost explicated here that food, a poet can explicate everything through imagination. I have explicated with that clothing, food, poetry, stationery, furniture, cutlery, cookery, jewelry, scenery, information. They always take singular verbs. But I am just talking about tree at my window, about this poem. Another poem, these many of Robert Frost's greatest poems feature tree and foods, and many of his poems take as their starting point a simple observation of nature that then prompt a deeper meditation. Understood? Then let's know about Acquainted with the Night. This is one slightly unusual in Robert Frost OAVS in focusing on the urban rather than rural world of many of his other famous poems. This is one slightly unusual in Robert Frost OAVS in focusing on the urban rather than rural world of many of his other famous poems. But one of the problems in interpreting the meaning of this poem is that first speaker refuses to tell us how he feels about his solitary through the night. How did the speaker feel solitary throughout the night? He mentioned, he depicted in this poem. Then number 6, fire and ice. Then this poem contains only 9 lines. Understood? Poem was supposedly the inspiration for the title of George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire. And let's say, curiously, apocalyptic, meaning to Game and Thrones. Apocalyptic. These images suggest various things. If we consider, fire suggests rage, war, passion. Understood? And ice indicates cold, indifference, and passivity, and can be interpreted in number of ways, which lends this classic short poem an ambiguity and deep symbolic quality. So this poem Fire and Ice contains only 9 lines, and in this poem fire indicates rage, war, and passion, and ice indicates cold, indifference, and passivity. Then Maui. Hard work, they say, is its own reward. This short poem, which contains 14 lines, but it is not a sonnet. It is not a sonnet. It is a meditation on the act of mowing the grass with a scythe. In this poem, the poet mentioned the value of hard work. Then desert places. Using the rhyme scheme and quatrain form of the rubaiyat, most familiar to English readers in Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. My lovely students, you have already known that Omar Khayyam, he was a Persian poet. Desert places takes a snowy nature scene setting. So desert places takes a snowy nature scene setting. Then Christmas trees. This poem, this 1916 poem is about a country dwelling man. Country refers to village. A country dwelling man who realizes the importance of Christmas trees on his land. When a city dweller turns up and offers to buy them from him. This poem was written in the blank verse. So Christmas tree, it was also written in blank verse, which Frost used many of his finest poems to create a conversational down-to-earth tone. My lovely students, you should keep your eyes on it. Let's go to the next one. The Road Not Taken. It appeared in his first collection Mountain Interval in 1916. So this poem was appeared firstly. The first collection in the Mountain Interval was the first creation of Robert Frost, and this poem was brought out in 1961. Indeed, The Road Not Taken opens the volume. For this reason, it will be this. For this reason, it's natural and understandable that many readers take the poem to be Frost's statement of individual as a poet. So many readers take this poem to be Frost's statement of individualism as a poet. My lovable students, let's talk about some very important points which are indispensable for your OAVS TGT English. Let's talk about some points to remember which are indispensable for you. Robert Frost believes that the road not taken was very misunderstood. He was the first poet to read at a presidential inauguration. Robert Frost won Bollingen Prize in 1963. The first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, had kept a book Robert Frost close to him towards his later years, even at his bedside table as he lay dying. Ezra Pound introduced Robert Frost to William Butler Yeats. Robert Frost was named Robert Lee Frost after the famous Confederate general. Robert Frost's full name was Robert Lee Frost. The name of Robert Frost's first book was A Boy's Will. A Boy's Will was published in 1913. Robert Frost had also written the poem Out Out. Out Out is the title of Robert Frost's poem, comes from a line Shakespeare's Macbeth. Understood? Robert Frost was an American poet, but he was initially published in England. After that, before it was published in the United States of America. Robert Frost wrote, "Freedom lies in being bold." Robert Frost frequently wrote about setting from rural life in New England in the early 20th century. Robert Frost was a poet and also a playwright. Robert Frost's second book was North of Boston. North of Boston was published in 1914. The harshest book of Robert Frost is North of Boston. North of Boston is a collection of 17 poems by Robert Frost. North of Boston is a collection of 17 poems by Robert Frost. North of Boston is also called a book of people. My lovable students, you have to mug up it, because most of the poems dealt with New England themes and Yankees farmers. That's why North of Boston is also called a book of people. Robert Frost had attended Dartmouth College, but for 2 months he got no degree from this college. Robert Frost had 6 children. Robert Frost's long philosophical poem is Build Soil. Robert Frost's long philosophical poem is Build Soil. Robert Frost's poem Fire and Ice consists of only 9 lines. Robert Frost's inspiration for his poem The Road Not Taken was Edward Thomas. In 1961, Robert Frost was named Poet Laureate of Vermont. Robert Frost says, it will be, I might be called a scenic dockist, for I prefer scenic docky in poetry. Robert Frost's father, William Prescott Frost, was a teacher and a journalist. Robert Frost graduated from Lawrence High School in 1892. Robert Frost was called upon to recite his patriotic poem The Gift Outright, which was brought out in 1961. The Gift Outright was published in 1961. The Gift Outright was published in 1961. Robert Frost won the second Pulitzer Prize in 1931. Robert Frost influenced Robert Francis, Simon Sidney, Richard Wilbur, Edward Thomas and James Wright. The book Mountain Interval was published in 1916. In the poem Mountain Interval, 3 poems were written in dramatic monologues. Robert Frost was 86 when he read at the inauguration of John F. Kennedy on January 20, 1961. Robert Frost got married his school fellow in 1895. At that time his age was 20. Robert Frost's wife was Eleanor Merriam White. New Hampshire was Robert Frost's 4th volume. Robert Frost moved to England with his family at the age of 38. The Ovenbird poem was described as a quintessential Frost poem. A Boy's Will and North of Boston was Frost's notable works. Robert Frost called his North of Boston a book of people. My lovable students, eventually I have kept 10 multiple choice questions on Robert Frost. Let's start. Question number 1. What form does the poem Mowing take? My lovable students, its correct option is option B. It is a sonnet. Question number 2. In rod not taken, which of the two rods appears less troubled to the speaker? Option A, the one he takes. B, the one he does not take. C, neither of the two. Its correct option is C, neither of the two. Question number 3. In the wood pile in question warms the frozen swamp with the slow smokeless burning of. My lovable students, 3 options are given here. Option A, dry moss. B, decay. C, a greenhouse. Its correct option is decay. Question number 4. According to the speaker in Mowing, what is the sweetest dream that knows? According to the speaker in Mowing, what is the sweetest dream that lover knows? Option A, the fact. B, beauty. C, rest. D, truth. Its correct option is option A, the fact. Question number 5. What does the wife see through the window at the beginning of the home burial? What does the wife? My lovable students, it is a little mistake is having here. It will be what does. What does the wife see through the window at the beginning the home burial? Its correct option is her child's grave. Question number 6. Stopping by woods on a snow evening was written in which meter? It was written in iambic tetrameter. Stopping by woods on a snow evening was written in iambic tetrameter. Question number 7. Complete the following lines. Something there is that doesn't love a. Its correct option is option A, dog. B, shirt. C, fancy. D, my lovely students, its correct option is option D, wall. Question number 8. What does the neighbor say in mending wall? The speaker describes his neighbor as. What does the neighbor say in mending wall? The speaker describes his neighbor as. Option C, is the correct one. Good fences make good neighbors. Good fences make good neighbors. Question number 9. At one point in mending wall, the speaker describes his neighbor as. At one point in mending wall, the speaker describes his neighbor as an old stone savage. And the last one, my lovable students, what does the speaker describe just another outdoor game in poem Mending Wall? What does the speaker describe as just another outdoor game in the poem Mending Wall? Its correct option is option B. Fixing the stone wall with fixing the stone wall that marks the boundary between his and his neighbor's properties. Fixing the stone wall that marks the boundary between his and his neighbor properties. Understood? My lovable students, brush up your knowledge and watch all of my videos to brush up your knowledge on English literature to crack your OAVS TGT English examination. Thanks a lot. May God bless you.